Apex and web services. So we're going to talk about a few things, and so we'll jump into these right now. But for the most part, here's the idea. We're going to talk about custom SOAP web services. We're going to talk about doing callouts to other systems' SOAP-based web services. In the third section, we're not only going to talk about RESTful web service callouts, we're also going to talk about defining custom REST web services in Apex. And then finally, we're going to talk about asynchronous Apex. Okay? So, in Apex, we can code custom SOAP-based web services. And one of the great things about working with SOAP is that you can generate a WSDL based on the code or the service that you've created. You can then take that WSDL over to some other integration server and then generate stub and proxy code on that other system to do the call into your service. Okay? So when we're defining custom web services within Apex, one of the things that it's going to have the ability to do is to take a look at the fact that we are defining a custom web service and give us the ability to download the WSDL for the custom web service that we just created. All right. All right, the way that this works is that we use the web service keyword. What you do is you are going to create a global class. So this is one of our use cases for global. You'd create a global class. You would then create a method. The method would need to be static. In addition, you'll notice that we don't have an access modifier. Web service is implicitly global. So it's not that it's private. It's just that when you apply the web service keyword, it is implicitly global. Here we have a custom web service. It is simply a method inside of our global class. We've defined that the parameters are a position object and a candidate S object, and that the return type for this web service is going to be an ID. One of the things that our WSDL generator will do for us is to define the SOAP representation, in this case of the position and the candidate that would be sent over the wire when requesting this SOAP-based web service. Here what we're doing is in our method, we have our business logic, which is to instantiate a job application, set the position ID. So here we're setting the position ID equal to p.id, which would have been passed. This is the ID of the record sent over to us. And then we're setting the status equal to new, inserting our job application, returning back the ID. So this is just a method. So we're going to receive our payload. Salesforce is going to take care of deserializing the SOAP message that we receive, giving us the reference to these objects, and then now we can operate on them. All right. Web service methods must be static. They cannot be overloaded. There's a few limitations with respect to the signatures, the parameters. You can't have a map or a set as a parameter type. There is a special annotation called read-only. And what read-only does is if you have a custom web service that is designed to return a large number of records or fetch a large number of records, and you want to actually go through the 50,000 limit in the governors for the number of records that you can retrieve from the database, you can apply the read-only annotation to that web service method. Now there's a key implication to doing this, which is when you apply the read-only annotation, as it indicates, you cannot do DML inside of that web service. So it allows you to blow past the 50,000 record governor associated with a single transaction, but like I said, you cannot do DML within that web service. Here's an odd thing about custom web services, which is even if you were to create a class and apply with sharing to that class that contained the web service, it won't operate in without sharing mode. But what you can do is you can create a class, apply with sharing to that helper class, and then call it from the method that contains the custom web service. So it's just a nuance, but all you need to do is create a second class and then call that second class. All right. So what's missing from this discussion is when we have an external client calling either a standard web service or a custom web service, we always need to log in first, present a set of credentials, and then get back a session ID, and then use that session ID to actually call our custom web service. So our next topic is doing a web service call out to a SOAP endpoint, so from Salesforce out to some other system. So here we have an example. We have Salesforce, so here's our Salesforce instance over there on the left-hand side. And what we're able to do is we're able to do a call out to either some web service that is public and out on the internet, like for instance Hoover's, let's say, or we might have our own internal, in this case, some sort of Oracle system. That web service that we'd call, we'd have to go through an internet-based gateway since we are on the internet, but we could call an internal system through that gateway. So what we can do is from our Apex engine, we can call your external systems utilizing web service callouts. Now, the way that we can do this is when we're working with SOAP web services that we want to call from Salesforce, there is a button in the Develop Apex Classes area, and what it is Generate from WSDL. So what you'd need to do, so let's say we're contacting a web service being hosted up here on Hoover's. What we would need to do is we would need to get that WSDL from Hoover's and then upload it by clicking on Generate from WSDL inside of Salesforce. What this will do is it will generate the stub code. Now we can do the web service call out to that system. The WSDL, just so you know, there's limitations in terms of what we're able to do with that WSDL. First of all, the ports that we will allow the call out to is 80, 443, or anything from 1024 or above. So all the other ports that might be called are restricted. The other thing that you're going to need to do is by default, Salesforce will block all of these callouts to external systems. So you need to whitelist the system that you're going to be calling, the domain that you're going to be calling. So here we have, in this case, this is this Strike Iron system. And so we need to go to remote site settings and indicate that we want from our org to allow call outs to this particular external system. Like I said, by default, we're blocking all of those. Okay. Schema support, we do not support the entire WSDL schema, but we do support elements and sequences, which are things and then list of things. So there's limitations on other types of data structures that might exist within that WSDL. Another big one is that your WSDL can't do imports. It all needs to be within a single one. One of the things that you can do when you generate that proxy code is you can access the header. So one of the things that you might do is put a digital signature within that header so that you can have two-way SSL so that your endpoint system can then receive the digital signature utilizing the public key, verify that we digitally signed it, and therefore it's an authenticated request coming from Salesforce to your system. In order to make that work, you're going to need to take either a self-signed certificate or a certificate authority signed certificate loaded into Salesforce using the certificate and key management area, and then now you're going to be able to digitally sign those messages that are going out. All right. After we've gone through this process, what we're going to end up with is a bunch of stub code. And this is where every single WSDL is going to produce different sets of stub or proxy code that we can now use to do that call out to that external system. We're going to be using a StrikeIron web service. StrikeIron is a utility web service out there. In this case, what we're doing is we're doing an IP lookup. So in other words, if you were to pass salesforce.com, it would then return, here are all the underlying IP addresses associated with that domain name. So what it does is it would have generated this StrikeIron IP lookup class. Contained within it is this inner class called DNS SOAP. And so we're going to instantiate this and then set up some properties with respect to user IDs and passwords. And then ultimately this call to this DNS lookup method, this is going to be the part where we actually perform that call out to the external system. So now let's talk about some of our limitations with respect to doing callouts. So the request response size is limited to 3 megabytes. There's a limitation within a single transaction on the number of callouts that you can do and the total amount of time that we will wait for a response. So the maximum amount of time that Salesforce will wait to get back that response is 2 minutes. And within that allocation of 120 seconds, what we will do, or what you're capable of doing, is 10 separate calls. So if your first call is going to utilize, let's say 20 seconds, the next 9 only have 100 seconds to work with. So when we're doing a call out from Salesforce to the external system, it depends on what that external system is doing or the way that they're presenting their data. Now, if it's like ours and you're running a SOQL query, you're selecting data from a specific object. Or for that matter, typically you are inserting a set of records or updating them or whatever the case may be. So based on the endpoint system, it may or may not be specific to an object, but they might have their own, much in the same way we can create a custom web service in the previous one that was working with candidate and job application objects. You could create a complex web service that does more than, operate at a sort of a table level. Okay. So it all depends on the capabilities of the endpoint system. All right. You can do a call out to Salesforce from Salesforce. In fact, this is what some customers have done to take advantage of the Chatter API. So from Apex, they do a call out to the Salesforce Chatter API in order to do things like make posts or fetch, last 20 feed items or stuff like that. These days, actually in Spring 13, there's a set of classes so that people don't have to do that, but you can, just so you know, you can do a call out. It's only one. You can do one call out to Salesforce. So the Chatter API provides additional capabilities. I mean, you could write the code much in the same way that we did with entity subscriptions or feed items, and you can actually directly query the tables. But the Chatter API is built for doing chatter-oriented business operations, like give me the last 20 updates for this user, in their news feed. And you could write the database query, but now you're writing complex database queries, and Chatter API is so much easier to utilize. So in that case, that's an advantage there.